Hey everyone, I'm Thom Albrecht, and welcome back to another installment of our nine-part Safety Impact webinar series. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Reliance, and today we're going to have both Mark Barlar and Daniel Vega walk us through hazmat, transportation, what's compliant, what's not. Sometimes you're going to get tender to load that you didn't realize was hazmat. There's a whole host of things that we're going to cover today. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. In addition, with Road Check, the CVSA International Road Check being barely 4 weeks away on May 12th through 14th, um, we are welcome to take questions on that. There's two big points of emphasis: ELD, tampering, falsification, etc., and cargo securement. And cargo securement is such a great topic because it's one of those control your controllables. Take care of the load before you get on the road. Every time you have a break, make sure things are secure. So if you've got some things about the International Road Check, we'll certainly field those questions as well. As we usually do here, we've got a little bit of housekeeping information as we go to the next slide. Okay, so we're in the eighth installment, and our next one and final one for this series will be on May 13th. Similar to what we did on the fifth installment, we're going to focus on case studies, mostly related to the last few CSA Basics, but we may weave in a couple from the earlier, kind of the first half of the series, and then just anything else that the guys are seeing in the field that they think would be pertinent for you. That was a really popular episode. You can sign up there through all of the socials, including LinkedIn or through your Reliance Partners agent. If you missed previous episodes or there's something you need to hear again, all previous episodes are available on our podcast under the Trucking Matters logo. And then, of course, we've got our fifth annual Trucking Matters conference. It's our national event in Nashville at the Grand Hyatt on July 22nd and 23rd. Really, it's a one-day conference. The 22nd is for check-in, networking, dinners, and then 100% of the content is on the 23rd. We've got a great lineup. We've got a shipper panel for the third year in a row, and we'll also have some shippers in the audience. I'm excited about that. We've got a fifth pending shipper, but right now we've got General Mills, Armada, KBX, and Simmons Foods. And hopefully by May 13th, we'll have that fifth one announced. We got a great motor carrier panel, and we've been promised someone from the FMCSA. So you can imagine who we've got our fingers crossed for. One last note, a couple other notations. We do take questions throughout the webinar. You can submit those questions through the chat icon at the bottom. And we always go through a brief disclaimer. This presentation and webinar are designed for educational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as legal advice. The opinions and views expressed herein are not necessarily those of Reliance Partners and belong solely to the individual contributors. So guys, welcome aboard. And as we always do, just because we always have some first-time attendees, I'd like you each to take just a brief moment, tell us a little bit about your career, what you did before Reliance, and what you do to help clients and prospects at Reliance. Daniel, why don't you kick us off?
Hi guys, my name is Daniel Vega. I was a former state trooper in Arizona. I was spent roughly 10 years. Most of my time was spent doing inspections. I was an inspector for the Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Unit. Went through Part A, Part B, hazmat training to do those inspections. Most of my patrol was spent down on I-10 and I-8 in the Yuma Quartzsite area. And then I transitioned to the insurance industry, where I went to Nationwide Insurance and assisted our clients with compliance and safety. And going on 3 years with Reliance, doing the same, providing training, submitting data queues, and just helping with any compliance and safety questions our clients may have.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Mark Barlar. I am a retired Wisconsin State Patrol Master Inspector. Did 22 and a half years of DOT inspections in the southeastern part the state of Wisconsin, in between Milwaukee and Chicago on the I-94 north-south corridor. It's an 8-lane interstate that sees about 20,000 trucks bypass that location every day, north and southbound. The last 10 years of my career, I was an instructor for the hazardous materials program for FMCSA and cargo tank inspection program. I was certified as a Part A instructor, which covers your driver's hours of service, excuse me, CDLs and driver qualifications. An ELD expert. And since coming over to Reliance Partners in 2020, I've been helping our clients out with everything to do with roadside inspections, including driver meetings, training, and submitting data queues, of which I've submitted over 1,500 in the last 5 years, and I win over 70% of them.
No, that's great. And that's one of the most valuable things that you guys do is data queues, especially for the smaller motor carriers that might be on here where, you're still kind of building out your company and those points really have worked against you. These guys often they win over 70% of the time. So guys, why don't we kick off the content?
All right. So one of the things that we've really noticed, we've gone through 6 of the 7 basics, and today we're going to talk about hazardous materials transportation. And when I first came over to this side of the aisle from enforcement over to industry, I realized that hazmat or not hazmat, but freight brokers and motor carriers, they've been shipping hazmat and they really don't didn't realize that they were shipping hazmat through carriers that do not transport hazmat nor have the insurance, the minimum levels of insurance required for transportation of hazmat. And we're going to walk through some of this of how we can identify hazmat loads prior to motor carriers hauling them and freight brokers giving them out to carriers that cannot haul these types of materials. Now, this is a recent bill of lading provided by a client. When you look at this hazmat shipping paper, in the middle, you see something that may say, oh, indicate that you might have some hazmat. You see hazmat with UN 1760. The first thing that should set you off, one, it says hazmat, and two, you have what's called a UNID number. A UN plus that 1760 tells you exactly the type of hazmat that is being hauled. In this instance, you see the number 8 after that 1760. Normally, you would think that'd be Class 8, which it is. UN 1760 is a Class 8. Now, on top of it, right below it, you have another UNID number with the CLS 8 after that, UN 2735. This is also a hazardous material that is a Class 8 corrosive material. Now, with these types of products, when you look at the amount of weight that was carried, these were placardable amounts. Placardable amounts means that you're going to have to placard the outside of the vehicle. You may have to put UNID numbers on the outside of the vehicle if it's hauling a bulk package of the hazmat. The driver's going to have hazmat shipping papers. They're going to have emergency responses. They're going to have the hazardous material endorsement on their CDL. This motor carrier had no idea that they were hauling hazardous materials until they sent me the shipping paper. I'm like, it looks like you're hauling hazmat. And we asked them to get what's called a safety data sheet from the shipper. They sent it over and it shows that it's being hauled as hazmat. So if you are a freight broker or you're a motor carrier and you get these bill of ladings, we're going to walk through what the bill of lading should show if it is a hazardous material. And we're going to give some common hazardous materials that are shipped that are hazmat and people really don't realize it.
Daniel, you're on mute.
When we look at the hazmat from brokers, we look at Mark. Can you go? There we go.
Mhm.
When you look at this bill of lading, you see that UN number, so kind of oh well, it's hazmat. I'm hauling hazmat. The battery's wet, filled with acid. But then we see that it's not subject to regulations per 49 CFR 173 159E. So what I recommend is that you guys look at the regulations, actually read it. In this case, um, you guys aren't subject to the other requirements of this subchapter. So, for example, if no other hazardous material, so no other hazardous material may be transported in the same vehicle. The batteries must be loaded or braced as to prevent damage. Any other material loaded in the same vehicle must be blocked, braced, or otherwise secured to prevent contact with the damage with or damage to batteries. And vehicle may not carry material shipped by any person other than the shipper of the batteries. So if all those bullet points apply, then technically you're not required um, to have placards on your vehicle. No CDL is required. But say, for example, your driver's driving down the road to get it pulled over for an inspection, and they open those doors on the trailer, and the load's damaged and there's acid spilling, then you're going to fall back into all those regulations. You're going to need to have placards to see the hazmat endorsement, trainings for drivers. So a lot of these materials have a lot of exemptions, but if there's damage to it, there's a leak to it, then it puts you back into the regulations.
And what you do see from this bill of lading is this is a two-part bill of lading. Delivery one, it says delivery address Northeast Battery and Alt Company. That gives you an indication of, I wonder if they're shipping batteries with us. And then when you get into the more detailed version of the bill of lading, you see that UNID number, which identifies it as hazardous material. And just as Daniel has said, if you don't comply with everything that's listed out in 173, 159 parent E, you come back into all of the regulations, all of them. And we look at that number on the right, which is 41,938, at the top of the bill of lading, it gives this column is weight and it's in pounds. So this carrier is hauling 41,938 pounds of batteries, and if they're not doing it correctly, then they're going to have a placardable load. Placardable loads listed on hazmat or on an inspection report. Any hazmat violation listed will show up on your CSA profile. It will. And then there might be then you got to do a lot of things to come into compliance. One of which is you got to get somebody there that has a hazardous material endorsement, or you comply with the exemption listed out in 173 159E. It's that important.
Let's go to the next slide. I've got a question or two, but I wanted folks to see this. Common items that are hazmat. I think what you're trying to convey here is common items that are hazmat that you might not initially think are hazmat. So take it away.
So common items that it has meant most people don't think of, lithium batteries. We have lithium batteries everywhere. If you're hauling cell phones, if you're hauling computers, you're hauling anything pretty much with a battery these days, it's going to have most likely a lithium battery in it. Now, there will probably be a consumer commodity, which brings them out of the regulations, but it keeps you in the regulations when it comes to minimum insurance requirements because it is still a hazardous material. Vehicles with internal combustion engines, if you're a hot shot and you're hauling cars all across the country, you're hauling hazardous materials. Now, there's an exemptions for that as well. It's a class 9 material. Car batteries, which we just talked about, those are normally listed as class 8 materials. If you haul auto parts, you're most likely hauling airbag inflators for the airbags that are in the vehicle, side curtain airbags, steering wheel airbags. All of those airbag inflators are listed as a class 9 material in the hazmat regulations. Lighters, if you are hauling lighters, it's most likely a 2.1 material, flammable gas. And then rubbing alcohol. Who would think that rubbing alcohol, the stuff that you keep in your house, is a hazardous material? Most rubbing alcohol is isopropyl alcohol and is a class 3 flammable liquid. These are they're just carried in a quantity which makes it a consumer commodity. Now, how do you know when it's a consumer commodity or not? Well, the process is pretty involved. You have to look up the information in the hazmat table, right? And then it'll give you some exemptions. You got to go to that regulation, read out the exemptions, and then if it complies with those parts of the exemptions, then you got to go to different areas to see if it is exempt from shipping papers, is it exempt for placarding, it's a whole process on how officers and motor carriers and freight brokers and shippers have to go through to identify hazardous materials. Now, each of the items listed on the left has an exemption, exempting them from all or part of the hazmat regulations, but it is hazmat. Regardless, it is hazmat. Fair to comply with the exemptions, all the regulations normally come back into play, i.e., car batteries not being secured in the vehicle. All hazmat transportation, no matter what it is, requires $1 million worth of insurance. This is an acute violation during an audit if you don't have the minimum required insurance for the materials that you are hauling. And sometimes for the really nasty stuff, you would need $5 million worth of insurance. Most freight brokerages are not handing out those types of products requiring the $5 million worth of insurance. Those are your inhalation hazard zone A's, your explosives, and highway route controlled quantities of radioactive materials. Very specific types of materials.
So,
I,
Mark or Daniel, just thinking out loud here. So, let's say a driver stops for fuel or a quick bite to eat, and they're looking over the bill of lading and they suspect that it is hazardous or hazmat, or they know it, maybe based upon what you've already shared today, but they still have 500 miles to go. What should they do? Should they call you? What should they do with their team back at the motor carrier? I mean, that could be like, what in the world is going on here?
I would say contact your safety person first, and if they have questions, contact Mark or myself, and then we'd be happy to assist any of you guys to make sure you guys are in compliance.
Yep, we can help you get back into compliance depending on the type of material that you have. We know the routes to take to find out exactly what type of material it is, and then how to properly classify it on a hazmat shipping paper if you don't have one, whether or not it needs to be placarded, whether or not the driver needs a hazardous material endorsement or a tank endorsement if you're hauling IBCs in the vehicle. We can walk you through that entire process.
When you talk about lighters, are you talking about even simple lighters like a Bic lighter that you might use to start the starter log in your fireplace? Little
That is
simple light. What's
That is
that?
exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's why we put it on here. Because most people don't realize that this is a hazardous material, may not require placarding, may be a consumer commodity, so that it'll exempt you from hazmat shipping papers and the placarding part of it. But you still are subject to other parts of the regulation, which may include training for your drivers and the insurance provision. So it's
Yeah, that's
important
wild.
for, yeah,
Well,
it's
and I
important.
think your points about so many auto parts um, containing hazmat or that may be hazmat. Over the last 20 years or so, most of the largest motor carriers have either left hauling for the automotive industry or made it such a small part of their business, which means that a lot of our customer base, the small and mid-sized carriers, are doing a ton of automotive. And so they may not be aware of these things. And so I think it's really good that you're highlighting this. George, we do want to acknowledge that we got your question. We will get to that shortly. Guys, why don't you, if you got anything else on this slide, certainly go take it further, or else we can go to the next slide.
No, we're good on this slide.
Yeah.
My cursor is going a little crazy now. There we go.
So, how to identify hazmat loads? So, um, I would recommend if you don't know if you're hauling hazmat, give us a call or take hazmat training or even just look at 172-101, which is a hazmat table. If you have a UN number, you go to that hazmat table and it'll tell you the product, if it has exemptions, basically everything you need to know. It'll give you the code so you could go back and forth. Hazmat's very complicated and you have to be looking back and forth because there's a lot of exemptions to it. Or you could call myself or Mark. He's an expert in hazmat. I even call him once in a while as well for some hazmat questions.
Yeah, and we'll share the guys' contact information throughout. But Mark and Daniel, you're available not only from 8 to 5, but a lot of times the discovery may be at odd hours. So,
Yeah, if it's something that's really important, hey, my driver just got put out of service for hazmat, send us. You see my phone number here. It's on all my emails. So is Daniel's. Text me, call me. If I don't answer during, from a phone call, definitely text me, and we can try to help you out. And if you're okay with it, Tom, I'd like to answer the question from George.
yeah, why don't you
Listen.
give the question for the audience
Yeah.
because I'm not sure what they can see.
Yeah. So it says we received a violation in Ohio stating that the HM/X in parentheses RQ marking must be placed directly next to the hazardous material description. However, based on my review and understanding, there is no specific regulatory requirement mandating the HM/X RQ must be immediately adjacent to the hazmat description with no information in between. In our case, the product ID was listed between the X marking and the hazardous material description. We'd like clarification on whether this formatting is considered non-compliant under applicable regulation or if the violation may have been issued in error. Okay, so the question isn't whether or not it's an RQ, it's where that RQ needs to be placed. Now, I'm going to geek out here a little bit and state that 172.203 I believe is where it states where the RQ must be listed. It's called additional descriptions mandated for hazmat shipping papers, and it is supposed to be immediately before or after the basic description. That's pretty much what it states. But as I do with all clients and with anybody that has a question when it comes to hazmat, go ahead and email me the hazardous material shipping paper. I will take a look at it and I will send you all of the information regarding that RQ and whether I believe it is compliant or if it is not. And when my fingers type so fast, I misspelled hazmat at the top of the screen. Um,
Hazmat. That's probably what they're saying when they realize, uh-oh, hazmat.
oh boy.
George, that's a good question. And
Excellent question. In Ohio, they send out administrative fines for hazmat violations. It's an excellent question. Send me that information. It's mark.barlar@reliancepartners.com. I will take a look at it for you. If you are on Telegram, you can send it to me via Telegram. Just look for my phone number there. That's how it's listed.
Well,
All right. So when it comes to hazmat and hazmat violations, what are the number one or the top 10 violations that are listed? Hazmat not secured in the vehicle. You see that I have two of the different violations listed with the different types of inspection software throughout all 50 states. They have different coding systems for each of the different iterations of their inspection software. So sometimes you will see that package not secured in the vehicle is listed as number one, and then on number five, operated motor vehicle with HM not blocked, braced, or secured. They both are 177.834A, which is your fair to secure hazmat. So instead of the number of violations being 9,200, we're looking at what, 15,500 violations, making it the number one violation. Uh, Violations number 2, 4, and 10 is your shipping papers and emergency response information. I grouped all of this information together because this is all about your shipping paper accessibility of where it needs to be in the vehicle. No or improper shipping papers. Normally, that's because the information listed on the shipping papers is not correct. In this instance, where that question from George came up, this may be the violation section that was listed on their inspection report, or it could be that 172.203 violation. And then you got the maintenance and accessibility of the emergency response information. Now, when you are hauling hazmat, you have your hazmat shipping papers, you have to have emergency response information, and you have to carry those two things in the same manner. So, where you got to have a shipping paper within your reach while you're sitting at the controls of the vehicle, right? And it's got to be readily visible when an officer enters the vehicle for whatever reason. Same thing with your emergency response. That's why I put all three of those together. Your hazmat registration number, number three violation. Your hazmat, everybody thinks you need to have the hazmat registration itself, that the one that's issued out by the Pipeline and Hazardous Material Safety Administration. You don't. You just need a document with the current hazardous material registration number on it, and you got to be able to show it to the inspecting officer. And then hazmat placarding and marking. You see, we got placard damaged, deteriorated, or obscured, prohibited placarding, no placards or markings when required. That section of 177-823A, they cover markings and placardings, which are two different two different uh, issues when it comes to hazardous material, and vehicle not placard is required. So I just put that down as hazmat placarding and marking. Everything to do with the hazmat placards. And since placards will have a UNID number on a lot of them, that is what's called the marking. And they kind of put all that together. And I just put it together because they kind of go together a lot of times. So those are the four things that we're going to focus on from here moving forward.
So the four areas of focus for carriers, and as Mark mentioned, they're the top violations. First one is shipping paperwork and emergency response. I mean, that's a pretty easy one. I mean, inspectors are going to ask. That's the first thing they ask for is your shipping papers and your emergency response, and then placarding and marking the vehicle. If you don't have the correct placards, or if you don't have any placards or incorrect placards, I mean, that's a pretty easy violation. Load securement as well, and then the copy of the hazmat registration, like Mark mentioned.
So I have a question for you, Daniel.
Yes.
Um, how many hazardous material inspections were you required to do each year to maintain certification?
I think it was 16, the 12 or 16 if I recall. It was a couple years ago, but it wasn't more than 28. I know that.
Yeah, it's eight for hazmat and there's eight for cargo tank.
Yeah.
Normally, when you get trained, most inspectors go, it's a 40-hour course for hazmat training and then another 40-hour course for the cargo tank training. And you're supposed to have eight of each to maintain your certification. Do you remember how many level one inspections you needed to maintain
32.
certification? 32.
Yeah.
Why is hazmat at eight and level one's at 32? Well, I think a lot of it is there's a lot more motor carriers and drivers and trucks out there than there are hazmat loads that are out there. That's one.
Yeah.
And so when officers only do eight inspections a year, which a lot of them do, they make a lot of mistakes on this. One thing they always remember though, I need to see your hazmat shipping papers and emergency response. They'll look to see where you got it from. And if you have to reach over your head and get out of your seat to get it because it's in the bin over your head, they're going to write a violation that it's not accessible, right? If you have your emergency response sitting in between the seats, then it's also you got to get out of your seat and you can't see it. The officer can't see it. And it's got to be stored in the same manner as your hazmat shipping paper. So they write those violations all the time. If those are the only two things that they focus on, they can do those eight inspections.
Yeah.
But it's not very often that you're going to be a very good hazardous material inspector if you only do eight a year. I used to do 100 plus a year in the area that I worked at. I love to focus on it because nobody else did. So it kind of made me unique, I
And
guess.
a lot of people also focus on like gas, like tankers and stuff like that.
Yes.
They don't focus on non-bulk on a dry van trailer. Like a lot of them just go for easy hazmat inspection as well.
Yep. So hazmat shipping papers, this is why these are some of the top violations that are out there. Another thing is they know that they absolutely have to be secured down in the vehicle. When you look at that lower left picture, you see the two pails with the hazmat labels on them. In your opinion, Daniel, is that secured?
No.
No, because they got to be secured from front to back, left and right motion. Have to be. Right? And it's the relative motion between packages. So even if you have the hazmat secured, all the other material you have to have around it has to be secured as well. Because hazmat is fine to be transported. It's once it's out its containment system is when it becomes really, really dangerous. So we got to keep it inside the container. And the way to do that is not to damage the package during transport.
Hey,
So
Mark,
hazmat, I'm
before
sorry.
we go to this next slide, earlier I gave the example, or you can go to the next slide, doesn't
Mhm.
matter. I gave the example of a driver who stops for a break, maybe for fuel or a bite to eat, and then in looking at the paperwork, realizes they may have a hazmat load, even though they were not told that ahead of time. What do you do when you're pulled over and the officer discovers it and it's a surprise at that point to the driver? I mean, you're kind of up deep doo-doo. So what what should the driver be doing at that point? Almost everything on that previous page will come into play then.
It very well could be depending on the type of material that is transported. First thing that they should be doing is they're calling their dispatcher, their safety people, the people that know, supposed to know what they are hauling. If they're unaware or if they don't have a good answer, try to get a hold of somebody that knows about hazardous material transportation, right? Someone like myself or Daniel, and we can walk you through. We can even tell you what's about to happen um, to that driver and that vehicle. Um, and then we go from there.
Because some of those violations, I mean, most of them are not out of service. But if you do get put out of service, if you fall back into the regulations for something, then you're going to need to know what you need to do to get back in service.
Yep. And if it's filling out a hazmat bill of lading, we can do that for you. They'll have violations on there for your emergency response telephone number, but at least you won't be put out of service and you'll have what you need to at least get you to your destination. If it is, if you're the shipper is closer than your destination, my recommendation is taking it back to the shipper and giving it back to them. Right. This is this will not only affect you for that one trip, but can affect you in multiple ways when it comes to either a an audit by FMCSA or if PIMSA comes in to check on things as well.
Well, and heaven forbid that there be any sort of incident where there's, an accident, even if minor, and you open the door to a plaintiff's attorney.
Apologize for that if that dog was barking.
Is it a hazmat dog?
Yeah, my herd hazmat is going crazy now. All right. So packages secured in the vehicle. As I stated before, any type of hazmat you have in the vehicle must be secured from side to side, back and forth motion. Not necessarily up and down motion unless you're hauling it on a flatbed or it can escape in some way, but definitely side to side, back and forth. When you're looking at these two types of containers on the right, these are called what's intermediate called IBCs, intermediate bulk containers. They're they have a poly tank on the inside with a usually that's an aluminum cage on the outside. That's just these are normally for liquid hazardous material. Sometimes it could be a powdery solid for them. You can see the space in between. There's very little space. So even if they move back and forth, no damage is going to happen to either package. You look, so you got to look at the space between the packages. You got to look at the space between the package and the wall. You got to ask yourself, can it tip over? Can it get hit by somebody, something else? Can it be punctured by something else. If you have 55-gallon drums on the vehicle and you have a pallet jack on there, those pallet jacks are known to cause some pretty good damage if they're not secured down. They can pierce 55-gallon drums pretty easily. And once that drum is punctured, all 55 gallons are coming out. And with this type of trailer, you see the grooves in the floor. This is normally a reefer type trailer. Those grooves allow that nice cool air to go underneath the product, keep the whole load nice and cool. Well, at the front of that vehicle are going to be two drainage holes for moisture to exit the vehicle. So if that hazmat leaks out of that containment system, out of your package, it's going on the floor, it's got a free flow into those grooves all the way to the front of the trailer, and it's going to leak out onto the highway that you're on. So things to be aware of on the types of trailers that you're using when transporting hazardous materials. All right, so packages having valves or other fittings must be loaded in a manner to minimize the likelihood of damage during transportation. Anything usually with a valve is going to be towards the bottom, so if anything comes into contact with it or damages it, if it causes it to leak, nothing is going to stop that leak until the product is completely out of that containment system. So what do you do to get it to stop? You try to get it into a different containment system if you can. You know, that stuff, those are things that officers normally won't deal with. They'll just see that it's a leaking hazmat, it's a damaged package, and they start calling fire departments and other emergency response personnel to contain the hazmat that's in the area from spreading and causing more destruction. And every hazardous material has unique properties. It could be that it can't get in contact with aluminum. It could be that it can't come in contact with water. It could be it can't come in contact with air. Each one is a little bit different. The best thing you can do, especially if you're having a leak of some sort because of the hazmat load securement, get that SDS. It'll tell you the firefighting measures and the how to contain it and what the health causes, what the fire issues are, if there are any, plus a bunch of other things on that safety data sheet. That's the best thing that you can use. That book for emergency response is okay to use, but that SDS is way, way better.
So hazmat shipping paper and emergency response, we're going to discuss the where they should be and what's required. So accessibility of shipping papers. So it's the responsibility of every motor carrier and driver to make sure that the shipping papers are readily available and accessible in case of an accident or inspection. In order to do this, shipping papers for hazardous material must be clearly distinguished from all other shipping papers. This could be accomplished by tabbing the hazmat shipping papers, placing them on top of the stack, or keeping them separate but readily accessible. That's a common thing that I would experience during my hazmat inspections is people would have a stack of shipping papers and then it would be in the middle, no tabs, no nothing. My recommendation to you guys is make sure it's the first piece of paper of all the shipping papers you have. And then when it comes to the driver at vehicle control, make sure that the shipping paper must be within your immediate reach, even while you are restrained by a lap belt. Like Mark was mentioning, make sure it's not in your sleeper berth. Make sure it's not on the floor where you have to take off your seatbelt. Just make sure you're able to reach it. I always recommend you guys put it on the left side of the door. So when the inspector opens the door, everything's going to be right there within reach. And then if the driver's not within the vehicle, just make sure it's on the left side of the door.
So just a visual view of where you should be keeping your hazmat shipping papers, your emergency response on the dash is good. Just make sure you keep your windows closed because, that wind comes across that dash, it blow them out the other side. Keep them on the passenger seat. Just make sure that there's nothing blocking the view of a hazmat shipping papers for an officer if they need to enter the vehicle. And the absolute best place is in the door in a holder that is absolutely the best. PIMSA has multiple interpretations that states that as long as it's in that area, in that door holder, they're good to go for this portion of the regulations.
When it comes to shipping papers, um, me and Mark were taught something to make it easy for you guys as well is how it should be written on the basic description. It's I ship, the ID number, the proper shipping name. As we see here, the ID number is UN1114, and then the shipping name, the proper shipping benzamine or you pronounce it?
Benzene, yes.
Benzene.
Benzene. Yeah.
Um, then we have the hazard class or division, which is the number 3, and then the packing group, which is packing group 2. Should also have the number and type of packages and the quantity as well. That's the correct way that shipping papers should be. If they're not like that, then I would get with the shipper and make sure they correct that before you hit the road.
Yeah, I would have added in the RQ if we would have known we would have got that question early on. But yeah, this would be a good shipping paper. Things to remember is you need the number and type of packages. A pallet is not a type of package. Okay. Drums, boxes, pails, cargo tanks, yes. Pallets, no. And when it comes to the weight or the volume, we need a unit of measure to go with it. 1100 by itself is nothing. 1100 pounds, perfect. 1100 gallons, awesome. That all works. So when it comes to the hazmat registration number, just know that some operations don't even require this hazmat registration number, but if you are required to have it, you have to give it to the inspecting officer. Make sure it's the current one. When you're getting inspected and you're hauling a hazmat load, get your permit book out and make sure that you can locate certain items. You're going to need stuff for your ELD. You're going to need your hazmat shipping papers. You're going to need your hazmat registration along with the registration for the vehicle and things of that nature. Look at that hazmat registration. If it's expired, do a search. Hazmat registration number lookup. You can download it to your phone immediately from PIMSA. You can do that. I downloaded this one a few days ago to put it on this PowerPoint. You can download old ones if you want, but only the current one will do.
Placarding. Don't take it lightly. I mean, if you look at the tables on 172.504, it'll basically tell you when the placards are required. I mean, if table 1, like Mark was mentioning earlier, if it's an inhalation hazard or explosive and stuff like that, you're going to require placards. Bulk, non-bulk, it has to be over 1,001 pounds for you to require the placards. And we're going to get into that right now.
Yeah. And when you look on here, it says that there's 9 different classifications for placards, but there's way more than 9 different types of placards. That's because they have some subdivisions within certain classes. Class 1, Class 2, they have subdivisions. There's none for Class 3, but there is for 4, 5, and 6. 7, there's none. 8, there's none. 9, there's none. So just some things to be aware of. So when it does come to hazmat placarding, you have to placard for a bulk package no matter what. Even if it doesn't have anything inside of it, but it hasn't been cleaned and purged, you will have to placard all 4 sides of the vehicle for a bulk package. You got to do it. And then you have to have UNID numbers in association with the placard on a white square on point, orange panel, or inside the placard itself. The UNID number for this load is 1049. This is a good placard and marking. This one, not so much. This is a class 3 placard. 1203 is the UNID number. 1203 is the UNID number for gasoline. Gasoline, class 3, should be all red. Just like the class 2 placard, which is a flammable gas, should be all red with the 3 at the bottom. This one had been whitewashed out. Good Wisconsin weather took care of that placard.
So, Mark, in a situation like that where the placard is clearly faded, what's the driver to do afterwards? Maybe he's been pulled over. Is he going to be allowed to drive, or does he have to get a fresh placard before he can go back on the road? There's a good chance it's not going to have an extra one just laying around the tractor.
All right. So in order for a vehicle to be placed out of service, the vehicle must have the placards that are required for it. It can't be have different placards for it. And if 50% or more of the placards or are wrong or missing, then they're placed out of service. If anyone misrepresents the product, it's out of service. So we would need to see other parts of the vehicle to see whether or not this one is so faded out that you can't even really identify it as a placard. And what's interesting is that 1203 can be displayed on what's called a white square on point. A white square on point is like a white placard. There's nothing in it except all white, and then there's the number 1203. But then you still have to have a placard for it. So it can be so confusing. This one, if we had another one that looked just like that, I would have placed this one out of service.
Great. A reminder to the audience as we go to the next slide. We're happy to take questions in the chat icon down below. So there's a lot of good material in here. So let's keep it going.
So as discussed in the earlier slide, for non-bulk packages, any hazmat that is on table one, you're required the four placards on all four sides of the vehicle. On table two, you require all four sides of placarding when the aggregate weight is over 1,001 pounds. So if you have two materials that equal over 1,001 pounds, then you're going to be required to display those placards on all four sides.
All right. So what happens when you get an inspection? This is a very recent inspection from a motor carrier, and you can see that there are one, two, three, four, five, six different hazardous material violations listed for this. And then um, things you that we look at when we're doing reviewing inspection reports for a motor carrier in case that we can do a data queue is one, I need to see the bill of lading. Is it a hazardous material to begin with? Right? Do you have any photos of it? I need the inspection report to show what type of material was being carried. Right? Now, with this load, when you look at the bottom, I highlighted where it says placards required. It says yes. And then I look over to the left bottom, it says HM class. It says 9S. That's a class 9 HM hazardous substance. Well, with this, I zoom in a little bit here. Any type of class 9 material does not require placarding for any transportation within the United States. Doesn't matter if it's in a bulk container, doesn't matter if it's non-bulk and you got 40,000 pounds of it. No, class 9 hazardous material requires placards. So why did this officer write it up as required placarding? It could be because a lot of shipping company or a lot of companies, motor carriers, when they're hauling the hazmat, will put the class 9 placard on there with the UNID number. Because there was probably so much of this product on board, they were probably required to put the UNID number on all four sides, that 3082. So then they just put it on the class 9 placard. Just because you put the placard on the vehicle doesn't mean it requires the placard on the vehicle. That placard required is very, very important to this inspection. Just for the fact that any type, if it's listed wrongly as a placardable load, we can do a data queue to have them amend the inspection report to show it as a non-placardable load, and then none of the violations listed will affect the motor carrier's CSA profile. The violations stay, but it doesn't affect their CSA profile. So if all of those are the only violations listed on that inspection report, and all hazmat inspections are level 2s, If it's a non-placardable load in CSA's eyes, that's a clean level 2. So you get all the benefits of the level 2 and none of the negatives that go with the violations that were listed, whether or not they were valid or not. So effectively, with this inspection report, we can have all 6 of these violations not affect the motor carrier. With this specific motor carrier, it raised their hazardous material score by 16 percentage points. They went from a 25 score to a 41 in 1 month just because of this inspection and because they didn't get to this data queue fast enough before the snapshot date. If they could have answered this data queue before the snapshot date, these violations would have never affected the motor carrier because it has to be a placardable load and listed as such on the inspection report before it will affect the motor carrier's CSA profile. Interesting that all the hazmat violations won't affect the motor carrier. Only the placardable load ones do. So what can we do as Reliance help you out with hazmat when it comes to data queues? If the officer cites a violation that has an exception or interpretation, and there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of letters of interpretations when it comes to hazmat hazmat regulations. Literally, you go to the PIMSA website and you just look up interps. It's amazing how many interpretations are written every year. Violation coding is incorrect. That's listed on the inspection report. And the correct coding has a lesser point value. We can do a data queue to have the inspection amended. Violation is listed as out of service, and it isn't. If it's not listed as an out of service issue in CVSA's out of service criteria, then they can't list it as out of service on the inspection report. This adds an additional 2 points to your to that violation point value when that out of service is applied. The officer is wrong in applying the law. This happens all the time, especially when it comes to hazardous material. And then inspection report is showing a placardable load, and it is not. Even if we don't contest it at the time of inspection, we can have that inspection amended. Hopefully, we can do it before it hits your CSA profile because it's not a placardable load. Other things that we can provide for a motor carrier is training on best hazmat practices, advising whether or not you do have hazmat loads, training our dispatchers and our drivers and other carrier officials on how to identify hazmat loads from freight brokers. And if you're a freight broker, we can also train you on how to identify hazmat loads when given those loads from shippers. Even if they say it's not a hazmat, I've had these conversations with companies and they said, we shipped out 30 loads of this and we haven't had any problems yet. I'm like, here's the regulation. I point out the regulations to them and it's like, you guys are the shippers. Do you have any exemptions that you know of? No. Then it's hazmat. And this is what is required for this load type.
It would seem to me, just based upon my experience around the industry, that this is probably one of the areas that's so in need of training. So you guys mentioned that just a moment ago, your willingness to go. You didn't say it on site, but I know from what you guys do that that's certainly one of the things you can do to educate asset-based carriers, freight brokers. What's your advice if, let's say, an asset-based carrier, and our customer base tends to be small and mid-sized, and they realize they've gotten a couple of hazmat loads. What should they be asking the freight brokers? I think earlier you mentioned the safety data sheet, but to make sure that the loads that they're getting tendered are what they think they are, what kind of conversation should they have before, the next set of tenderings?
Have a conversation with the freight broker. I have no issues on talking with the freight broker on a webinar just like this, on a Teams meeting, in a Zoom call, so I can share the screen. I can show where the material fits into the hazmat table, what is required from it. if there are any interpretations, if there are any special provisions. And then we just walk them through the process of this is what will happen if you ship this out with this carrier and they get stopped. And the officer recognizes what they've got in the vehicle. So that's the conversation I would like to have with carriers. I have had these conversations with freight brokerages. And it's a little eye-opening to some of them because a lot of these freight brokerages, they don't understand the hazmat regulations. They might have the information, yeah, but it's exempt. Class 9 isn't exempt from the regulations. It gives you some exemptions from placarding, but it doesn't from the hazmat shipping papers. It doesn't from the training requirements for that driver, which we are required, the motor carrier is required to train them on. Um, it's not exempt from the labels of the vehicle or the marking, possible marking of the outside of the vehicle with the UNID numbers. They may be exempt from the hazardous material endorsement, but those are things that we can walk them through.
Yeah, in a smile and dial environment, and we've got so many great freight broker customers. I'm not trying to make that be a backdoor put down, but sometimes training can be a little lax, or because the hazmat loads may be infrequent over time, folks may just get rusty on the regulations. So a refresher course can go a long way. We're down to the last couple of minutes here. We're going to leave it open just in case there is one more question. Um, okay, good question, Julie. Can you guys re-summarize again what you would ask the freight broker? And the context I gave was you, the asset carrier, realized that you've gotten one or more hazmat loads, and you're like, that's not what we signed up for. So, what would you, again, summarize that you would ask?
Well, what I would say is, hey, Mr. Vega gave us some training on how to identify hazmat, and this is looking like it's hazardous material to us. And if the freight broker gives you pushback, you ask for what's called the safety data sheet. If you know the product by name, you can usually look up the safety data sheet online, and it'll go right to the manufacturer of the material. And a lot of them have their safety data sheets online. So if you know it is monopolymer 68 from DuPont, and I'm just making stuff up. I'm just making stuff up. You get a company out there, you have the company and you have the product name, you can probably Google it with safety data sheet and you'll probably get a couple of returns on it. And then you'll get a really, really good idea of whether or not it's hazmat.
Good question, Julie. Yeah, and you mentioned the common sense. Earlier, we talked about there was a load to a battery plant. Yes, it's possible you're taking in a load of paper supplies, toilet paper, paper towels, whatever else. But if it's going to a battery plant or whatever, a DuPont plant, Monsanto, whatever, that should be a situation where you stop and pause and ask a couple questions. I might
Yeah.
add, just as a question, if you're dealing with freight brokers regularly, and most of the asset carriers have maybe their 1 to 3 go-to brokers that they really like, but
Mhm.
you might just start proactively asking, do you have hazmat customers? You don't even have to ask about the load. Who are some of your hazmat customers if they say yes? And that can also put you on alert for, wait a minute, this is a load going to or from this hazmat customer. I better understand what's in the load itself.
Yep. It's the products that we use every day is hazmat and we don't even realize it. Hand sanitizer has ethanol in it. Most cleaning supplies will have a sodium hydroxide in it. Bleach. So it was that sodium hypochlorite. You get those in the high concentrations and it will eat through a lot of stuff. Concentrated bleach. Bleach is a hazmat.
Yeah,
So
Clorox is a huge shipper for a lot of
mm,
truckload carriers. So good, great point there. What about Vaseline? Is that hazmat?
I would have to look at the
Yeah.
safety data sheet for that. Because realistically, Vaseline will burn pretty good. I use it for starting fires with cotton balls in the fire pit. It works great.
By the way, we just stimulated two more, or I think we have another question here. Let's see, or maybe I just missed it. We got Julie's question. Oh, George just had a follow-up comment about 30 minutes ago.
Yeah, he said, yeah, we paid. They paid a fine for it.
Yep.
Um, and that comes directly. They don't even, as long as the violation gets listed on that inspection report from Ohio, then PUCO, the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, automatically sends out an administrative fine for those violations. Yeah, here's my email address here. Go ahead and email me that inspection report as well as the hazmat bill of lading for that load. I'll take a look at it and give you my opinion on it.
Guys, you covered some really good material today. I want to thank our audience for joining us. The materials will be available in a day or two. This will also be going into the podcast under Trucking Matters that we mentioned earlier. A couple of last reminders. Our Trucking Matters National Conference, July 23rd in Nashville. I mentioned a couple of the panels earlier, panel, motor carrier panel. We're also going to have a litigation panel with one or more plaintiffs' attorneys, and they're going to give us some insights into what they're looking at. And you'll be surprised at some of the things that they're okay with a motor carrier sharing, but also what they look for when they're about ready to sue a trucking company. And then, of course, our next safety impact webinar, May 13th, 3 p.m. Eastern. We'll have sign up information on that next week. It'll be about case studies, which is really what I enjoy. I think when we get into those during any of the webinars, real life examples go a long way. Guys, thank you for your time. Thanks for the audience, and we will look forward to seeing everyone in just a few weeks. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you.